Hola y bienvenidos a la Wine Down. The Wine Down is a time in your week and ours when we talk about delicious things. We're interested in everything that is fermented, distilled, cultivated, or nourished. We strive to bring to you each week our experiences and our interests, and we hope you do the same on thelit.tv. Today we have a very interesting man in the studio. In fact, some say he is the most interesting man. And we also have my co-host, Brandon Bartlett.
Hi, I'm the least interesting man.
Yeah, this guest of ours actually carries with him a family name that is very important, respected in Mexico. And some say is responsible for the tequila industry that we know of today. Bienvenidos, Señor Guillermo Sauza. Salud.
Welcome.
Salud. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Ooh, a little Fortaleza to start out the show.
Ooh, little Fortaleza Blanco. Fantastic. But, you know, my introduction only goes so far, and we've asked Brandon to actually prepare a little something for this moment.
You know, Tim, I've had the pleasure of hanging out with Mr. Sauza several times, and it always kind of seems like he's just got this persona to him, and it's kind of the most interesting man in the world-esque, if you will. So I thought I'd, you know, cheers a Dos Equis with him. Cheers. You've had Dos Equis before, haven't you?
Well, I don't always drink Dos Equis, but I do always drink Fortaleza.
Ah, nicely done. Salute. And in his honor, I kind of put together a little most interesting man in the world-esque, because you should have your own sayings, just like he does. So I've got 3 of them. His great-great-grandfather and the most interesting man in the world's great-great-grandfather once got in a fight. It lasted 3 days, and it was called a draw after 3 days, and neither of them had a scratch on them. Tequila gets drunk on him, and he doesn't fear death. His Day of the Dead parties are legendary, and everyone feels safe because the Grim Reaper is one of his most hilarious party guests.
Good.
So, good to have you here.
Very good. Thank you, Brandon.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tim.
You got it. You know, having you in studio so close to a very famous celebration here in America, one that's often misrepresented, but it's obviously the defeat of the French in Puebla, Mexico, on Cinco de Mayo, 1862. So we appreciate that here we are in the world of tequila with Señor Sauza himself. So thank you very much. This is going to be a day when we're going to just kind of celebrate a little bit of the old school of tequila. You know, when we look at some of the brands like Sauza and Cuervo and some of the bigger brands out there, which your family had a little part to do in, you know, but now we're looking at a brand like Fortaleza. And I've been circling around the tequila market for the last 25 years, and to find a brand that has so much substance behind it, it's quite a treat. So, Zenobio Sauza, and this man was who to you?
Well, Zenobio was my tatarabuelo, and that tatarabuelo means great-great-grandfather. And he was born in the 1840s, and he got to the town of Tequila in the 1856 or 54, when tequila was going through a boom time. And he worked there. Eventually he ended up running hacienda. Back in those days, everything was haciendas, big, very large expanses of land run by, they were originally from grants from the Spanish government. And he ended up running a hacienda called San Martin for the governor of Jalisco. And of course, he learned how to make tequila on that ranch, and he ended up being a distributor, taking tequila to the United States back in the 1860s through New Mexico.
He was the first, wasn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe he was the first to have a legally imported tequila through New Mexico, which used to be our land, of course. So
yeah,
but
before it was new.
But And he started his brand in 1870 with his first distillery, and he started with which was called La Antigua Cruz, the old cross. And then he started, he changed the name to Perseverancia, or Perseverance.
Perseverance.
And that was 1873 is the date they put on the Sauza logo, but it's actually, he started with a leased distillery in 1870, 3 years before that.
So if we go back to 1873, and we did a show recently with Michael Gardner, who's the president of Del Maguey Mezcal, and Ron Cooper, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with these guys, but you know, part of that was really diving into the beginnings of this spirit. And so obviously we know that this was originated through a lightning strike into an agave that created this light, and pulque and the Aztec Indians. So can you take us back a little bit further, because that's mezcal, and we want to kind of move forward into what's the difference between mezcal and tequila.
Well, the Indians, when the Spaniards came ashore, the Indians were cultivating the agave and in large expanses, and it was an agave type, a very large agave that they make pulque out of, because the Indians were using the agua miel, we call it, from that. And the Spaniards actually worked their way up into the area of tequila, and tequila was founded in the 1540s, so it's a very old town. And when the Spaniards got there, they found that the Indians there were cultivating the blue agave, which is now classified as agave Weber or agave tequilana. And the Indians were cultivating it as a food source, because once it's cooked, it's very sweet. And both of you may not have had an opportunity to try it, but once it's cooked, it's very, very sweet.
It's almost like a yam or a sweet potato.
Yeah, much sweeter, actually. Much sweeter. It's actually sweeter than molasses, and it's very high in the brix level. And the Indians were cooking it, and they had actually about 25 uses for the plant. They actually would pull off the leaves, the thorn on the very end of the leaf, and if you pull that down, you get a thread out of that. So they were using it for sewing. They used the leaves for their huts, called chozas. And so there was a lot of uses for that. But in those days, you got to realize that everything was set up as an hacienda. If you came as people to immigrate to Mexico, and if you weren't Catholic, you couldn't get in. And if you weren't from Europe, you couldn't get land. So the land was all set up in vast expanses, very, very different to the United States, where you guys put stakes down, go kill the Indians off, and it's your land. And as you know, in Mexico, of course, so you had these giant, vast expanses of haciendas that were growing whatever they could grow to be successful as an agricultural entity.
Well, you know, the Spaniards, I was reading up on it, and there was a defining moment, and it was when Spain controlled, obviously, Mexico, and Spain was a big wine producer. And obviously there was a moment that was done just as well in Mexico as anywhere else, and they said, no, you can't compete with the empire. So there has to be something else that you need to use that's grown locally to produce your party favors.
That's correct. The tequila wasn't legalized to about 1758 because of that reason, because they didn't want any distilled spirits competing. Of the research that I've done and studies that I've done, they didn't want anything competing with the motherland. They wanted the motherland to supply all that, and that's typical of any political entity where the people around the king were all feeding him, hey, I don't want competitors. And so, but then again, we've got some many stories or many history that we don't obey all the laws. So imagine if you're out on a 50,000 hectare ranch and you set up your own still, just as was done in Pennsylvania and those areas for distillation. So I think the distillation was there long before, and they finally legalized it in 1758.
Then you were just allowed to talk about it.
Well, and the government started taxing it, but as you know, it's in the old days in Mexico, Mexico City was the hub of everything, and it took days and days of riding to get anywhere else. It's a very mountainous, we have a very mountainous country, and it was very hard, difficult to get anywhere. until paved roads came in. The road to Tequila from Guadalajara wasn't paved until 1968.
Yeah,
Pardon me, 63, I believe.
I think about, Don Sonovio, having those original barrels, going to the United States when he was the first one to do it, and just the trouble it must have been to get them there, and just what you have to go through. And, I don't know how, whether they were taken by cart or horse, or I have no idea.
Wagon, everything was moved by wagon. In our museum in Tequila, we have a wagon in there, a typical wagon that was used in those days to haul the barrels. And so I like to tell people when they see it, I said, next time you complain about the roads in Los Angeles, imagine going 2,000 miles in one of these.
You've been driving on the roads in Los Angeles, though. I bet you the roads are better now there than they are here.
No.
Well, it's interesting because right when you were saying that, there was a shot behind your shoulder of just, a really lush environment. You're looking at green mountains. It looks like you have plenty of rainfall in this area. It's not as arid as I would assume. Most of places where I see agave, and the picture's right behind you now. It's fantastic.
Beautiful.
This looks like there's a golf course down in the ravine.
That's a view. If you come down, that's a view you'll see from the side of our distillery, and that's our property there. And we look at the mountain. The mountain's 10,000 feet tall, just about. It's a expired volcano, or a dormant volcano. Hopefully it'll stay dormant. And that's what gave us our soil in the area. A lot of volcanic soil. The agave likes well-draining soil. If it doesn't have well-draining soil, the agave will actually get diseased very easily. Right. But our rainy season is, generally speaking, from July to October. And I believe we get around 60-some inches of rain, if I'm not mistaken. What do you get here in California? Around 40 inches of rain in northern Cal?
About that.
I think we get 60 or 70 inches of rain. It's a lot of rain, but it's in a short period of time. And then we have a tremendous dry season. Right now they have a giant forest fire just outside of Guadalajara that's burned around 6,000 acres. And
that's burning right now?
Trees. It's going right now.
Oh, wow.
It's out of control, and as of this morning, it was still out of control. Because we have the dry season. Right now is the dry season. We may get one storm in January, maybe one in early February, and then we don't get rain until July.
So just because we're on that subject, when I think of agave, it's a cactus. So obviously it doesn't necessarily need a lot of rainfall to prosper. Does it have a taproot similar to like a wine vine that will go and find water where it needs it?
Now, agave is not cactus, though, right?
It's not.
It's not. It's a lily family.
As in common with the cactus is it breathes at night. The somas, the cells open up at night to do its carbon dioxide exchange. And that way it's a very conservative plant in terms of water use because of that. Okay. But it does have a fibrous root. The root goes down maybe, I'm going to say, half a meter, foot and a half down, but it's a fibrous root. When we harvest the plants, the root gets cut off right at the ground level. In fact, if you watch the harvest, the guy we call a quimador will cut off one side of the leaves on one side of the plant, and he'll put his foot up on it, and he'll push it a little bit to give a little pressure to the side, and he'll cut it off. It takes about 2 minutes to harvest the plant.
So when you say that now, when we've got pictures behind you, and we're going to show a video of this process as well. I think it's fascinating when you look at something that's that big. You're looking at 100 pounds plus for a piña, the center of the agave.
This one's 110 kilos.
Yeah.
This is larger than normal.
Okay.
Normal would be about 35 kilos.
Gotcha.
This one's 110. That's why we like the picture of it.
Those
I'll make
colors
about 14
are sharp.
bottles out of that.
Those coals are sharp.
You take your leg right off,
Yes.
and I can guarantee you cannot make a round one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yours will look like an octagon.
Believe me, I've tried. It looked horrible when I was done with it. Trust me.
Well, let me bring this back. Let's go back a little bit further because the name Tequila. So as I understand, so going back to like 1758, that's like the beginning of the term tequila being used for this product. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a whole, it may have even been sooner than that. Legally, that's what it was called. We have a whole series, in our museum, we have a whole series of old labels from my grandfather that they were in the safe after he died. I got in the safe about 5 years after he had died. He had left some firearms in there and a whole package of old labels. They're all in books. They're absolutely beautiful labels. But actually, most of the labels will have vino de mezcal. wine from the mezcal, but they were distilled spirit, or aguardiente, aguardiente de mezcal. It was in those days, it appeared to me from all of the old labels that I saw, it was mostly called mezcal. And I remember as a kid, we called the plants mezcal. And I believe that there's been in the last 20 years, there's been a push by the CRT, the Consejo Regulador de Tequila, to push people to use the word agave to differentiate them.
To differentiate the quality level. And from what I've always learned, Don Zenobio was the first one to take the vino off the label, and rather than vino tequila, have it just be, say, tequila, you know. That's always the story I've heard.
That very well could be sure. I've not seen Cuervos. I know Cuervo started as La Rojeña.
Yeah.
And we have labels that say Jesus Rojas, who was the original owner of the Cuervo distillery. He died, and then his widow got remarried to the man named Jose Cuervo, who was running the ranch at the time. He would have been what we call the capo, or the.
And now they make hot sauce.
Well, there was something I read that actually the two families, the Sauzas and the Cuervo family, were joined together at marriage at some point.
Well, it's slightly. My grandmother is related to one of the Cuervos, but if I'm not mistaken, Jose Cuervo never had any children. It was his brother that had children, so that's how we were related through the Cuervo family. But the Sauza family and the Cuervo family did fight in the old days when Jose Cuervo was there. And one of the Cuervos had actually shot my great-grandfather at the train station in Guadalajara.
Wow.
So.
That's good.
Wow.
You would expect that, because if you go back to the days, you know, here in America when we were fighting over whiskey rights during Prohibition or whatever, I mean, those are powerful factions coming together and meeting, so I'm sure there had to be, you know, some differences there.
They handled disputes back then.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, going to, you know, moving forward, 2003, 2006, it seems like, you know, the future of tequila has been put up, you know, and put up for debate. You know, I know America, we had a place here called Temecula, and there was something out called Tequila, you know, and it was basically, and I was reading this.
It kind of sounds like Tim, I'll kill you, for some reason.
But the tequila trade agreement was made, and then, you know, NAM came in and started, I guess, registering distilleries and all of that. But you're going to know much more than I do about this, but I want to get your opinion on those movements that took place. Seemed like there were some larger factions involved that protected their interest, which still means that tequila can be brought into America in bulk and bottled here.
That's correct. The original genesis of the CRT was actually back before 1968.
Okay.
And my grandfather lobbied, and some other people also lobbied to create an appellation zone for tequila. As you know, tequila was the drink of the cement workers, the albañiles, in Mexico. In fact, for many, many years, it wasn't even hardly drank in Mexico except by the workers. And my grandfather labored many, many years to bring a product up to another class, which he did with Conmemorativo and Tres Generaciones, opening a new class for the spirit. But the CRTs, starting way back in 1968, was the first revision of that, and they created the appellation. And I believe it was 1976 maybe when they formalized it all, or 74. And they created the area that's the appellation, and we like to say tequila is the heartland of the appellation. I just need to get that in. And I think it's a good thing, obviously, that they've certainly created this. Because there's a lot of confusion. There was a lot of fraudulent people. There was a lot of people that were buying product that was made out of a column still, and it was basically almost a grain alcohol, and mixing it with a quarter, you know, 1 liter of tequila to 5 liters of grain alcohol, and selling it on the side of the highway as tequila. There's a lot of that going on, adulterated.
Any legitimate brand is going to be very happy about, you know.
That's correct. We are very happy about the work.
Any legitimate brand. You know, I know there was a thing with a few different tequilas down there that just, whether it be Perfidio or, you know, that just weren't making the right thing at the right place. And at the right time. So.
A number have been actually closed down, and I think just recently I heard, and I haven't confirmed it, but I've heard that 2 distilleries were closed down for using the wrong type of agave while they're making tequila. So these are good things that we're being supervised in a stance to ensure a standard quality, that it is from the blue agave, that it is 100% blue agave. Now, Tim, you had mentioned about bottling in Mexico. There was a big issue about whether they should even make a mixto tequila, which is basically, you use your agave and you make 100,000 liters of agave juice, and then you can use 99,000 liters of other sugars and make what we call a mixto tequila, but that would not have the 100% agave on the label. Now, there was some movement to try and get everybody to bottle everything in Mexico, and the problem is, at that point, there was not enough bottling capacity in Mexico to be able to bottle all of the mixto tequila that's done. Now, there is enough bottling capacity for the 100% agave, and that was the issue that was, I don't know, at some point somebody will try and do that again, but it's really not in my opinion, it's really not a resource efficient, because if you're making a mixto anyways, ship it to the States and bottle it where it's closest to the market. 100%, okay, I can understand. It's 25% of everything that's sold, or 30% of everything that's sold.
As long as you don't have to get it all there on a cart, you're fine.
With oxen pulling it.
Exactly.
Well, it's been. There's a salute.
I like that. Any chance to drink? Hey, great comment. Cheers. Hey, well said. Salute.
You guys are watching us. This is not water. This is, in fact, when we introduced Guillermo onto the show, we did a salud with Blanco tequila, and I have to tell you, this, I mean, I could drink this like wine all night long. It would be very dangerous in the wrong hands,
or in the right hands,
or the right hands. But so we actually introduced you with a product that you make now, and this is La Fortaleza tequila.
The distillery is called La Fortaleza because we always name our distilleries with a name, and the distillery is a feminine, so La Fortaleza. And the brand name is Fortaleza, and it means fortitude. This distillery was one of the 3 distilleries my grandfather had. He had Perseverancia, and he had Constancia.
All very strong names.
And the last was Fortaleza, which was the smallest. And when he sold Sauza, he sold the Perseverancia, and Constancia went with the deal. And fortunately, we were left with this tiny little distillery that was, he closed in 1968 because it was too inefficient. And back in 68, they were actually making a mixto. And the old mixto rules were a little bit different. The mixto rules were 70-30, 70% agave, 30% sugars. Other sugars.
Yeah.
They were
cane
mostly
sugars,
using the
grain
first
alcohol.
I believe you call the first pass of the molasses, the first pass of the sugars. They would use those because I remember as a kid, they come in bags, and they look like what's a peanut brittle? They look like that, but much darker. But they would break off like the peanut brittle, and they'd come in sheets, and that's what they would use in those days that I recall. Now it's granulated that I've seen in all the other distilleries.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe back then in the sheets it was the sugarcane byproduct.
Yeah, the first pass, or I don't know how that works, but we started the distillery up in 2002. It took us about a year to rehabilitate it. Our boiler is built in 1903. We started by re-sleeving that boiler. And we built steam up, and you have to have steam to make tequila. So
thanks to Don Hilario.
Don Zenobio bought that.
Yeah, but from what I've known, Don Hilario
indirect heat.
Yeah, he was the one that started doing steam rather than the direct fires, and that was his addition to
This was 1903, and I don't know when it got put in there, but yes, that's a good point. So the steam, we re-sleeved it, we got it working again. And it's a fuel oil fired now. And then we fixed our stills, and we distilled water for about 3 days just to stress test the system. And we said it works.
It's pretty good water.
Well, in the first tequila we tasted coming out, we stone crushed it. We had a plan to build 2 brands. One was going to be a high-end brand, one was going to be a low-end brand, one was going to be stone crushed, and the other was going to be machine crushed. But we tasted what came out of this stone and crushed, and we just decided let's change the business plan. Let's just make stone crushed, because this is something that's you don't find anymore.
Such a signature. I mean, as we were talking about before, tequila is becoming a destination spot. I mean, you know, I've never met so many people, and I've been in the business 25 years, people that have been down to, you know, down to Tequila, specifically walking right by your facility and not really understanding what it means in the history of tequila as well. But you know, we're talking about a lot of different things, and there's some great visuals that are being played behind us. But I found a video, and I'm going to give credit to Mark Alberto. He's known as the Tequila Traveler.
Good friend of mine.
And he put a great show together. It's 9.5 minutes long. We're not going to do that to you. So we went ahead and picked out a little segment of it, and I think it really shows a lot about what you're about. So guys, if you could put that on for us, I'd appreciate it.
Let's go find out why.
Bienvenidos a Cava Fortaleza. As you know, thanks for coming out to Tequila. Thanks for being here in the heartland of the appellation. This is where it all started. Our little distillery was closed by my grandfather in 1968. It's a very small distillery, but as you know, we make tequila the old way. I was a young boy. My grandfather took me to the fields, and he would teach me about the agave. And one day we were walking in the fields. I was maybe 6, maybe 7 years old. And we were walking through the fields, and he was telling me how the agave grows and how it develops and the work we have to do to it to get it to maturity. And he stopped, and he reached down, and he picked up a handful of dirt, and he put it into my hands. And he said, un puño de tierra. And he put it in my hands, and he said, esta tierra es la tierra de mi padre, y es la tierra de mi abuelo, y es la tierra del agave. Siempre hay que cuidarla, porque esta tierra es la sangre de nuestra vida. And I'll never forget that. Since I was a small boy, I knew I was going to make the best tequila that there was ever made, because I'm making it the way my tatarabuelo made it, my great-great-grandfather. And very few people get this opportunity to walk in the footsteps of their abuelo, bisabuelo, and tatarabuelo. Well, this is our little distillery, and the whole process starts here in the oven. Walls are about 1 meter thick. And this is where we'll cook our agave for about 30-some hours using steam. It's the old methodology of cooking. Gives you the best tasting agave. The difference in a very large distillery would be the milling operation. They use automated mills, which would mill what we mill here in a day. They'll mill in about 10 minutes. But the automated equipment leaves a different taste. Of course, the fermentation in the wood also imparts a distinct taste, as does the small copper pot distillation. We'll make at the end of the week, we'll make about 2,000 liters on a good week. So we're very, very small batch. So my guys work a 12-hour day. They like to work. There's not a lot of jobs here. I've asked them many times, should we put in the mills? And they say no, the taste will change and their jobs will go away. Because one automated mill will do the job that I have 5 people doing today. But we like this taste that comes out. As you can tell, it's very, very tasty, very smooth. Now we have our own agave, but we also buy from the small farmer. Because it's important, the small farmer that's around here, there's a lot of people that plant the sides of the highways. They have little plots, and we buy from them because we got a small distillery. If you're going to do this kind of labor on this kind of agave, you need to have the sweetest agave there is.
fantastic. I mean, when you look at what we just saw, and then we think back at the pictures and the stone mill in the background. The only thing that's been replaced is the donkey that's pulling that stone wheel, and now you have a tractor, obviously, the tireless mule. But it's really, I think, passionate for me to actually see a brand. Why are you laughing?
Tireless mule. I don't
Tireless
know.
mule.
Yeah, but tractors have tires.
That's a new T-shirt.
Thank you.
But I think it's refreshing for me to see a brand that's being made by hand. And like I mentioned before, you know, we had this Del Maguey group on that was talking about the mezcal, and I mean, and I see this movement in the spirits business of people. You can't just say it nowadays. You actually have to walk the walk. And I think if we all went back 25, 30 years ago, there was a lot of this talk being said, but obviously we know what was going on in the distilleries themselves. So let's talk a little bit about this history of your production, these elements that we saw, the steam ovens, you know, the agave, the small farms which you're sourcing from, and then actually the hands-on production of tequila at La Fortaleza.
Well, of course, it starts with the agave. And the agave takes us 7 to 8 years to mature.
Wow.
And it takes a lot of labor in between to take out the rhizomes, weeding, to control the pests that we have. We have 5, 6, probably 7 different pests that can take out an entire field. And I'm going to jump out for 1 second. And you all remember that you probably heard something about the agave shortage that there was about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, might even be 10 now because my memory's not as what it was.
Time does fly, especially when you're
Tequila
drinking good tequila.
now.
But that agave shortage was caused by a pest, a fungicide, pardon, that's the wrong word, a fungus that was attacking these plants. And we saw fields and fields that were 4 or 5 years old. This thing would hit, take out the guy's whole field. And I think I saw estimates that it affected about 30% of all the fields, creating the complete agave shortage that we had. So there's a lot of challenges to being an agave farmer. There's another challenge of just finding someone to sell to. Fortunately, for the small farmer in our area, our oven is 15 tons, so we can buy. And the small farmers sell direct to us. They don't have to go through a consolidator and lose half of their money going through a consolidator. A big factory would use 400 or 500 tons a day. So they have consolidators out there buying it. And so that's the first step, is sourcing a good agave. And you want to get as sweet as agave as you can. The sweeter it is, the more yield you're going to get. So if you're going to stone crush, you want the sweetest agave you can find. Some of the guys that work with automated machinery, it's not so important because you don't have as much labor value into it. First step is cooking. We cook the old way in the brick oven. We cook it like it was cooked 200 years ago. It's a 33-hour cook process. There are more modern ways, I like to say, of cooking, like the autoclave or the diffuser even. But I don't think you get the same taste out of that. And I think it makes a difference. It's kind of the analogy I like to use is the baked potato in the microwave versus the baked potato in the oven. I can taste the difference.
That's a good analogy.
So,
Can I ask you one other question on that,
sure,
too? Because in cooking, you know, you think of a cast iron skillet. It's going to build up a little bit of a seasoning that is distinctive to that one pan, that can't be duplicated anywhere else. Does that exist in this type of cooking procedure, that you might have a little bit of patina inside of these ovens that adds to the flavor?
no, I think what's happened is the size of the oven makes a big difference, how much steam you use, and everybody's cooking is going to be slightly different. So I like to say every single distillery, their sequence of how they process and what level they distill to is going to create their unique tequila.
Right.
Our next step after cooking then is milling. So we mill, as you saw in some of the pictures there, we actually stone mill it. It's about a 6.5 hour, 7 hour day for my guys to mill it. And in the old days, they would take it right from there in buckets, cubetas we call them, and they would carry it on their heads. And I actually saw this at Tesoro about 15 years ago. The guys were still stone crushing, and they carried it on their heads. And they would put it into the wood vats for fermentation. We call them pipones. and their wood, and they would put it in there and then add the water there. So what somewhere along the line my grandfather or great-grandfather did is they added the water in the taona. So we washed the agave in the taona, and there's probably a picture in there behind us that shows the guys pulling out the bagasso, or the fiber from the agave. We want to get the pulp off the fiber because the pulp is what's sweet. The fiber is basically wood. Yeah. And that creates methanol, so you want to get the fiber out of there.
So when are you putting the water in? When it's that round area that with the stone?
The taona, T-A-H-O-N-A.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I had that right. Okay.
So we put the water in there, and we're the only ones doing it this way. I think there's really only one other guy that's 100% stone crushing, and I believe it's a brand called Tesson. That I don't believe they sell it here in the United States. It's Pernod Ricard. Mostly they're selling in Europe, but they still stone crush. I know Siete Leguas still does some stone crushing. But I don't think he makes a product that's 100% stone crushed. Our product is all 100% stone crushed. We do not have machines. And as you guys were talking about the tourism, we've had over 400 bartenders come down to visit our distillery. And what you see on the bottles, what you taste in the bottles, is exactly how we make it. There's nothing hidden in our process. So after the fermentation, which is a 3.5-day fermentation, then we go to double distillation. And our small copper pots, you see them in the background right there. It's a 400 liter and a 250 liter, so they're small. I think that makes a difference. The size of your pot's going to make a difference. But they're not direct fired. They are a steam tube going through on the inside, which is a much more controlled way. Direct firing, I don't know how anybody could distill being direct fired.
Yeah.
I know people
there wasn't an option back in the day before, you know.
But it is a tough job to distill, even with steam. Then once we've double distilled, the Blanco goes to storage. It's no air gets in that storage, so it doesn't age, and that's what we bottle there.
Now, are you considered the master distiller, or do you have somebody that works with you? Or
I have distillers. They do what we've set up. We have one process, and we try to stay within that process. We have one brand, Los Abuelos. We bottle under the names Los Abuelos and the name Fortaleza. Los Abuelos in Mexico, Fortaleza here in the United States. But it's all made exactly the same way. When we bottle Fortaleza, if we have a lot number on the back, so if for instance, a lot 12 of Fortaleza and a lot 12 of Los Abuelos is bottled at the same time, came out of the same bottling lot.
Right.
So I was online, and there are some real geeks out there in the tequila world which were rating your lots. So it's similar, very similar to wine. And I'm going to draw some other similarities to wine as well. After all, we'll call the wine down. But when you look at the lots, that's more of along the lines of like a vintage, correct?
Well, it's a bottling lot for us, so it's not a vintage. A vintage is coming from the grapes, and you can trace it back to a year. Remember, our harvest is all year round, and our harvest is different parts of the field depending on when it matures. So you can have a row of agave, and in the 5th year, some of that in that row will actually mature, and you got to go get them out of there.
Gotcha.
The 6th year, some more will mature. 7th, going to get maybe 40%, 50% of the field in the 7th, and the 8th year, the 30% that's left. So it's not really vintage, it's a bottling lot. It's not a barrel lot either. We have a different barrel lot. A barrel lot for us could end up being 5 different bottling lots.
Gotcha.
But there are slight variations in it, and that's why the tequila, the gentlemen, the aficionados that watch that, they will have differences in. I'll tell you a difference in, for instance, in our Reposado, we had a lot that was 11 months, almost 1 day short of being a year, lot 5. So if you can find a lot 5 of our Reposado, try it. You'll never have a Reposado like that.
Right.
But that was also a processing, slightly out of parameter of the processing. So I can't tell you what that is. There are some secrets I have to keep, but.
Well, let's. So on that note, a couple things I just want to ask you really quickly on is, organics are such a big thing. Organic, biodynamic, all that stuff. So how much does that have to play in agave farming these days? And then the other thing is the stone mill. One of the things I think in wine we think about, they used to trod grapes by foot, and the reason they did that is because when you stepped on a seed, your natural reaction was to step up because you didn't want to crush the seed. So is there this element of not wanting to put too much pressure on the agave because you might release some sort of negative component? Anyways.
Well, let me answer the second one first, which regarding the milling of the tequila. Yes, everybody used stone mills in the old days. Probably in the early 1900s, people started using machine mills. These machine mills are modified sugarcane mills, and they make them in many different sizes and make them in a train of mills. And yes, I believe the mill rips the fibers and releases what's in the fiber, which is cellulose. The fiber is actually wood. So you get a higher level of what comes out of the cellulose. I kind of liken it to the grapes. In the old days when they had the press that you screwed down, well, you couldn't crush the seeds, so you're not getting what's inside the seeds, for sure.
So less sweet, more bitter.
So we look at it in the same way and say, when we throw our bagasso out, there's still 2 points of bricks in it. Right. You can actually put it into a bottle, shake it up, pull the bagasso out, put your brixometer in there, and you get 2 points. You go to any distillery that's using machine, and then you do that same test, and you won't be able to measure it on the brixometer because you're going to come up
gotten
less than
every
zero.
single bit out of it. Yeah.
And there's a place for those guys that want yield. We're not interested in yield. We're interested in taste.
Understood.
And how about the organics and the farming technique?
The organics, there's a lot of people moving that way. I think it's a very difficult issue with the pests that we have.
Right.
It's a very, very difficult issue to deal with the pests, because we have pests that will take your whole field if you're not watching it. Fertilizer, the plants do need fertilization. You get much bigger plants, and you can fertilize organically with cow manure and goat manure and chicken manure. And those things are easily done. But the weeding is still by hand, and the pest control, you have to find some way of dealing with the pest. Organically, I don't know what that solution is for the different types of pests.
Right. Let's taste some tequila. So I'm going to ask you right now, we've been drinking the Blanco, and that was just because I grabbed it and I started pouring, but where should we start this tasting?
Well, Tim, I always feel you should start with Blanco.
Funny you should ask.
I always feel you should start with Blanco. This is the purest form of the distillery. This is the, how would I like to say, the footprint or the fingerprints of the distillery. This is what that distillery makes in a Blanco. Now, we do distill to 45%, and we cut back to 40% when we bottle. So we do use some demineralized water to get back down to 40%. Generally speaking, the industry distills to 55% and higher. So you're cutting back with a lot more water to get back down. Now, the water's demineralized, so you're not adding any new flavors or any new essences. It's basically an inert substance, right?
Sure.
Just to get us back down to 40. And some people have always said, why don't you just distill to 40? And I always say, well, things happen. I was going to say another word, but things happen in a distillery. And if you work in a restaurant, wherever you work, things happen. Yeah. And you can always go down, but it's very easy to go up. I mean, it's very difficult to go up in proof. If you ended up at 38% and you got to build up to 40 now, you got to add some high potency batch in to get it back. So getting into the nitty gritty details, because your show has people that will be interested in that. Sure. But so we distill to 45 and we level it off. All our products are 40% or 80 proof. We like to say we don't make any girly men stuff.
This is very clean.
But I got to say the finesse on the nose. You know, when you go and grab just some bottle, some random bottle of tequila on the shelf, which will most be according to price. This has a sophisticated nose to it. It's subtle. It's got sweet notes to it. You kind of start moving into the citrus notes, a little bit of spice on the back end, but not too much. You figure this is very unadulterated. There is a resting period for this as well?
Well, it stays in the tanks. It stays in tank stock until we're ready to bottle.
Let's see, zero wood.
No,
hence,
no wood.
No color, perfectly clear.
That's why
silver
it's
plata.
Clear. It's
Blanco.
That's why we call it Blanco right here. And we have the stone there, and we have the distillery right up here. I like to tell people what you see on the bottles actually exists in real life.
Yeah, a picture of the estate, a picture of the distillery, and then the stone mill.
The stone milling.
And then something you mentioned as well, which is just paying tribute. And I mentioned, if you were to go to Mexico and you went down to your distillery, you would see Los Abuelos.
That's correct.
And Los Abuelos just happens to be a brand of rum that also was imported into America. And so you got a cease and desist and said, hey, you need to come up with another name.
Yeah, it's really a rum called Ron Abuelo.
Ron Abuelo.
And so we ran into some trademark issues with them, and we decided it was easier to change. And we are changing in Mexico too. We will keep using Los Abuelos for extra añejo that we will bring in.
Ah, that was going to be one of my questions after.
And these products are going to Fortaleza in Mexico. So you, a few more months, you'll be able to get Los Abuelos in Mexico, but that label will be just used on the extra.
Well, plus the cachet that the name Fortaleza is gaining, amongst bartenders, and obviously not on the case scale, but I almost liken it a little bit to the Jameson craze that's going on right now,
Thank you.
And it's Jameson is just embraced, by bartenders. Fortaleza has been embraced by bartenders. There are a lot of bartenders, when unprovoked, will bring the brand up.
Hey, we're in a marketing environment, and it's so funny, the stuff that's been forced down our throats for so long. So looking for brands similar to this, that's why I get so excited when you said you'd come on the show today, because I can name 1,000 brands within the wine world that I've had hands-on experience with that guys decide to do it differently. They are afforded a premium price as well, which is kind of interesting. I mean, your Blanca sells for about $40 a bottle?
$49 retail.
$49. So, I mean, that's amazing. That's way up there in that stratosphere. That's in that premium level. But you warrant it because of obviously what's going on. And we saw the pictures in the video. I mean, it's the real deal.
Nobody's scoffing at the price, and that's a nice luxury to have.
So this is the Blanca, and we have to drink everything that's in our glasses, by the way, boys. So
yeah, but
we don't even have a
my third one. You haven't been watching. Every time it goes to just Guillermo, I'm going, salute. Now,
well, I just drank mine. Salute.
That's all right. Guillermo, everybody obviously has a different palate. I would love to hear what you taste when you drink this.
Our Blanc was very, very smooth, but it is not my favorite.
Okay.
But I always do start with Blanco again because it's the true essence of that distillery, and tells you what's coming out of the Blanco. I taste a little lemon, slight taste of lemon in there.
Yeah.
Maybe tiny background of licorice in the background. And it's just too smooth.
Yeah.
First time we got that still going again. Now remember, last time they ran in 1968, but they were making a mixto. This was 100%. We don't have sugar in our factory. The only sugar you're going to find on our property is the one I put in my coffee, which isn't much, by the way. But that's the only sugar you'll find on our property. We tasted this coming out of the stills, and we were stunned. We were absolutely stunned. We go, wow, we got a product here. And so that's the background on it. But most of the time, I drink Reposado and Añejo. I just have to tell you that.
You think the tequila knows it has a history?
Well, you got to figure that over 100 years ago, everybody was stone crushed, and everybody took the stone crushers out. So I'm glad they did.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Your benefit.
But when you drink this tequila, just think of Don Zenobio and all of what he had to do to get going.
It's a big deal. It's a great history. It's a great legacy.
Thank you.
Which is Los Abuelos, and his abuelos are all denoted on the actual label itself, which is kind of interesting. Living underneath the umbrella of such history, I mean, that's got to be quite amazing. I mean, you think about it, every day you're reminded of your legacy, and I'm sure it has to be an amazing amount of responsibility. And you have a son as well, right? And how old is your son?
And we call him Billy. It's his name. And he's 21. We just had his birthday party in the caves on March 21st. And
it's a pretty cool birthday.
Sauza actually brought over a 220-liter barrel for his birthday. Chris Petty, a good friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
He brought over a 220-liter barrel for him, and it was just great. We all signed it up, and we had about 30 bartenders from the States down.
Very cool. Well, technically, you're a Billy or William as well, right? Isn't that the translation of Guillermo?
Guillermo, yeah. Memo. Memo was my nickname in college.
Thank you.
But to answer your question, I went to San Diego State University.
Hey.
My alma mater, all right.
It was a party.
Did you grow up here in general, or did you grow up in Mexico?
No, I grew up both in Mexico and near Illinois. I did a couple of years in school, grade school in Mexico, and in a year of high school down in Mexico. So I grew up with feet on both sides of the border, I like to say. But I really feel my heart belongs to Mexico.
Yeah.
It's interesting when being introduced to you. I think us gringos up here, we all have an image of a Mexican farmer or a Mexican, and you obviously have heritage. We share a little heritage. My last name is Skogstrom, and you have Eriksson as your middle name. So you have a little Swedish, Scandinavian. We're Vikings. We can drink a lot. And we're fierce fighters, I'm sure.
Now we're into the repo now. Tell us about the repo.
The repo's 6 months in the barrel. The barrels are used whiskey barrels. They are chipped out. I don't think I have a photo in this set here for them, but we do chip them out and they get reburned. We do multiple postings in them. And when 3-4 postings, they'll stop painting up. Like they'll paint up to this color in 60 days.
Gotcha.
And then it'll stop painting. But we go 6 months on our Reposado. And if you're a whiskey drinker, you're going to like the Reposado. If you like whiskey, you like the Reposado and the Añejo.
Whose barrels are you buying?
Well, these are some of the Jack Daniel's barrels, and I think we're going to be using some Beam Global barrels now.
Some Beam?
Yeah, some Beam barrels. And I like the taste it imparts the barrel. This is what I would call the pure. And this is modified by barrel now. And so it all depends what you like. A lot of people ask me, which is the best? I say the best is what you like on your palate.
Yeah, well, and I tell you what, you're gonna obviously get more flavor once you start using some of the Beam barrels. Well, no, I don't mean that just because I work for Beam, but obviously any Beam barrel that you get is going to only be used once. The Jack Daniel's barrels can have been used more than once, so you're obviously going to get more of that whiskey character.
We chip them out.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I'm just kidding you.
So let me ask you.
Doesn't matter.
When we talk about the age of the barrels, though, you chip them out, so you recondition them. How long can you use one of these barrels?
Well, some of them are 20 years old, so it depends how you use them, and you can chip them out 3 times, then the wood gets too thin.
Gotcha.
I almost spit my tequila up.
Well, this, I got to tell you, so you start adding this little element of vanilla, to it coming from the wood. Definitely comes more on the palate than on the nose for me, but you still have a little, that citrus note still kind of translates through.
Yeah, definitely more on the palate. You get that little bit of honey in there.
Yeah, honey. That's probably a better.
Yeah,
better
for me, I get honey, and it's just nice and subtle. You can tell it's a little bit more viscous. It's a little bit heavier in your throat, and it's smooth as ever.
Do you get any orange?
I do.
Get a slight tinge of orange in this one.
do.
Well, I get a little bit of lemon on this one. I get a little orange.
Yeah, you get just a little bit of orange peel. Yeah,
orange
just
peel.
a little bit.
God, I have to tell you one thing. I mean, a crime would be to really mix these up. I mean, these are delicious sipping tequilas. I mean, a shot, fine. If you're looking for something that's smooth and you don't want to really kind of gag on it, this is amazing. But sipping, this is really enjoyable.
No burn. It has no burn, and it just has a delicious aftertaste. We like to contrast in many tequilas have kind of a metal taste to it. And we don't have that in ours. And the Reposado and Añejo are my favorites, as I mentioned earlier. And
yeah, there's nothing
I'll drink
metallic
them out of a wine glass.
Yeah.
I like the wine glass. It opens it up enough for me, and I just really enjoy it out of a. But you will find me most of the time drinking out of a shot glass.
Yeah. Let's see
do
what happens with the Añejo.
Yeah, really. Can't wait. Now, how long is this aged for that makes it an Añejo?
2 years.
2 years.
Has to be one,
You can see,
correct?
well, give me a second. I'm going to get rid of that.
By law, it's got to be a year.
Now, I just have to mention that we can go from Blanco to Reposado to Añejo in the same glass. But I couldn't go the other way.
But you couldn't go the other way, correct?
Makes sense.
And because I take that Blanco and I just put it in a barrel, and it becomes Reposado after 6 months, and after 2 years it becomes our Añejo. Some of our early lots of Reposado, of Añejo were 3 years, and some of our early lots of Reposado, lot 1, lot 2, in that area were almost 1 year.
What are you planning for your extra añejo?
The extra añejo is going to be 5 years, and we've got a batch ready to go. It's in tank stock already, and we're going to bottle it. We're working on the label.
So it will stray from what you got here.
The label's very similar. We're going to go with a black label with a the reverse basically of what you see here. But it'll be black. It'll be a flat black. It will not be a shiny black, and it'll have a little bit more copper in it. But what'll be on the front is the museum.
It's similar to what's shown behind you there?
No, it'll be. Unfortunately, I don't have it in that set, but it'll be just like this label, except it'll be black. The elements will be switched around.
Right.
And it's going to have in the vignette. It's going to have the museum, which was the casa de mi tatarabuelo. And it's just right on the central plaza. So that's what'll be on the extra añejo.
Now, I know that you have a new head of sales that you've hired who's come up with a lot of stuff. Is that one of his brilliant ideas? Matthew Coons, I believe his name is.
Oh, on the extra.
Is that one of his brilliant ideas?
Well, no.
Okay.
That was been in the pipeline for a while. It's been fermenting.
There you go.
What is the price point on this extra aged?
The extra age will probably be around $200. It's 5 years. We lose 50% to Angel's share. On our Añejo, we're losing around 25-30% to Angel's share.
That's some happy angels.
Yep, you bet. We've had some. The Reposado is you lose just very little bit what the wood absorbs, but
I mean, let's put that into comparison, because we just had the boys from La Fourgon, and they were saying their losses are more along the lines of 3 to 4%.
Yeah, well, it's a lot colder.
It's a lot colder, but
Yeah.
then they also mentioned that if you go back to Kentucky and you think of the bourbon producers back there, they're losing 5 to 8%.
Yeah.
So you're going up to 25%.
oh yeah.
Yeah, it's all the heat. Basically, the difference in heat, 4 to 1 from Kentucky to Scotland.
So someone's made the statement that this is the most expensive distilled spirit in the world, tequila. Production, aging, loss. I mean, all those things are going to come into play on it.
It's really the raw material, though. The raw material is probably your most expensive component on everything.
So we've established 4 to 7 years for the crop.
To actually 7 to 8.
7 to 8.
Yeah. You get a little bit in the 5th and 6th years, but it's 7 to 8 basically.
So whiskey is pretty much you got 3 harvests going on in one single year.
Yeah.
Wine is
vodka's going to be the cheapest.
Yeah. Well, vodka's the same thing as whiskey though, so that would be the same. And then you've got, but it's not aged.
But it's not aged. Yeah.
Right. You can use cheaper grains on a vodka.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's something that people really need to think of. We need to move ourselves in California specifically out of this arena that tequila, and someone mentioned it too, they're like, everyone has this like bad experience with tequila because we start off at such a young age as binge drinkers.
Drinking bad tequila and too much of it.
And drinking way too much of it until you throw up. And then all of a sudden, then you mature and you get to this level where you want something to sip. And
You guys weren't trained professionally then.
yeah, I went to San Diego State.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So this añejo is,
Isn't that fabulous?
It's a stunner. I mean, it really is fantastic. And again, I would attribute this to, moving towards more of a cognac, to a single malt scotch, to that type of market. Someone who really wants to break down the taste components and really enjoy each one.
Yeah, I want this in a snifter with a cigar.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm drinking the Plata, I want it on the rocks. That's just how I drink Plata. When I'm having the Repo, I want it either just neat, because there's so many great flavors. If I am, tell you the truth, it's funny that you said orange. If I am going to have it mixed with anything, I might do it on the rocks with a little squeeze of an orange peel, or even like an orange twist. But absolutely, this añejo cigar
And
and a
the nose,
snifter.
it starts morphing a little bit into like a little bit of this molasses, just kind of a more concentrated vanilla sugar kind of component.
Get a caramel off it, almost off of it.
I get the vanilla and the caramel.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite, and we're going to run out of time here in a few minutes, but
We got all the time you want. All the time you want, my friend.
I'm very fortunate to walk in the footsteps of my abuelo, bisabuelo, and tatarabuelo. We have their initials on the side of the bottle here. And it's a responsibility for me. I'm not an owner anymore. I'm a caretaker for the next generation because my son seems to be interested in. We're looking forward to he's already training. He's working with the distributors. So he and I will be working speaking of anybody that wants to drop in this summer, we'll be working in the distillery, I think most of the month of July. So you'll be able to drop by and visit us.
That's cool. And you guys have a Day of the Dead party that is kind of legendary, isn't it?
We do. We have some authentic caves. We're the only tequila distillery with authentic caves, and they're quite extensive. And we have a Day of the Dead event, and you got to bring a costume though.
And I'm always in one. So
Dia
I'm
de
set.
los Muertos. The other thing, and we've shown this graphic up before, but this is kind of like an industry, and we have a lot of people in the industry that actually, and there it is on the screen right now, that actually watch this show. So, Guillermo invites everyone down. This year it's going to be Sunday, July 8th through July 11th. If you're already serving Fortaleza tequila, they'll even pick up the hotel. But if you're not, and you're just associated with the industry and you connect with them, and we'll have this information on our website, you pick up the hotel and they'll pick up everything else when you get down there. So,
well, it's weird.
Wait.
If they're, I just want to clarify.
What time does the limo arrive to take you to the helicopter, Guillermo?
500 cases a year, you get to fly down on his Gulfstream.
No, can't do that. It's illegal.
That's
All
right.
There you go.
Can't do that. But no, if you serve our product, we pick up your hotel down there. You got to pay your own flight. Not everything's covered down there, but there's a great party, and you're having a good time. And if you're with the industry and you're not carrying our product, you're welcome to come too. But you got to pay your own. It's all in the details, though.
There you go.
Otherwise, we'll have everybody down there.
I know. I was going to say a record year, 500,000 people show up. There's a new agave shortage.
Well, you guys, Tequila Fortaleza. You might have to do a little work at this point to find it, but you will be well rewarded when you do. I have a favorite account of mine, and I did a little research, and I spoke with the boys, and that was that Mission Liquors in Pasadena. Probably has one of the best prices I've seen in California on your product, and they ship to everywhere that's legal. They have all three of the products in there. You can find it in some of your neighborhood. You just want to look at some of your higher-end spirit shops.
We're in California, Nevada,
A lot of Vegas.
Oregon. Oregon's tough to find us up there, but you can find us Oregon. And in Vegas, we just got on Mr. Lee's.
Yeah.
And we're in Total Wine in Vegas. Not a lot of places in Vegas, but we're doing well. Here in California, a lot of places.
Yeah.
And you can go to your local bar in California. But do look up on our list, losabuelos.com, LOSABUELOS.com. And we have a whole list of everybody that has it. We're not on the East Coast yet, but we will be there soon this year. We are in Chicago, though. There's a lot of places in Chicago that are carrying the product, too. So if you're out there towards the east, you might, and you like to try and get a bottle of this, you can do it in Chicago. Just look at our list. Benny's is actually carrying it in Chicago, too, now.
It's worth finding.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for
Hey,
being
what
here.
an honor to have you in studio, and especially to have you in person to share your tequilas with us.
For Cinco de Mayo.
Gracias
Thank you.
por Dios.
Salud.
Salud.
Mi abuelo, bisabuelo y tatarabuelo.
Adiós, amigo.